Good afternoon and good evening, all of you. Today we have a special guest joining us today, Ms. Jhilmil ji. She was an ex-MD Crowdstrike India operations, and then we have packed. We have a jam-packed session next 30 minutes on how should one go about building a billion-dollar cyber enterprise. As you all of most of you are startups joining us today, and then as you go about building cyber products and your company, we are very fortunate to have Jhilmil ji join us and then give her thoughts on how she went about and doing building CrowdStrike India operations, and what are some of the key learnings and that you should be mindful of as you build your startup and company. We have I think we are going to cover 4 or 5 topics, starting from what you should solve for and how you should go about doing it, how to expand international geographies, how should you build a culture of innovation in your company, and so on and so forth. So it's a privilege to for us to have Jhilmil ji with us today, and with that, I invite Jhilmil ji for today's session. Jhilmil ji, thanks again. And my first question for you is essentially, can you take us through a journey of how you went about building CrowdStrike India operations from, let's say, I think you're the third or fourth employee, and then now we have 700 to 1,000 people in CrowdStrike India, and then you played a instrumental role in this journey, right, of CrowdStrike India. So can you walk us through your journey on how and what and how everything materialized?
Right, thank you. Thank you, Teja and the SCI for giving me this opportunity to be here. And Teja, my name is Jhilmil, not Jhilmil ji. So please keep that in
Okay,
mind.
sure.
All right. Yes, you are right. I've been fortunate that I've actually built a number of organizations from scratch, including CrowdStrike at India. And trust me, it is not easy, right? When you are a relatively unknown company, nobody knows you. At least the tech circle, people you want to hire do not know you. It is difficult to hire and scale. And you
Hmm,
do not have enough people really to create an impact when you start off. And then, you have to be the MD, you have to be the janitor, you have to be the IT person, you have to be the admin, you have to be the recruiter, you have to play multiple roles, right? So I was doing all of that, in the initial few months of being in CrowdStrike. I used to call up candidates. I would talk to the FedEx guy as to why they were not delivering a certain parcel. I would order office supplies. I would figure out why the printer was not working well. You do all of those things, right? And I was also building the organization. I was trying to find an office space, getting the construction done, hiring people, and all of it. So this is where you need to put your ego aside and roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty. And I think that's true for every entrepreneur, every engineer who wants to work in a startup. Things are
hmm,
not defined. You don't know what processes you have, you don't have enough infra, you don't know. So a developer, for example, who joins a startup needs to figure out every step of the way how to really
yeah,
move, right? It's not just they have a playbook, everything is in place, you come, log in, you start work. It doesn't work that way in a startup, right?
yeah.
So that's one part of my learning, that you cannot, everything is not defined. You need to define things, you need to create it, literally create it from scratch.
Hmm, hmm,
And
hmm.
I think the
That's
other part is sorry.
No, no. Please go ahead.
Yeah. The other part is where, you how you build the company in terms of people are always a little skeptical in a startup, right? They sometimes get
Hmm,
frustrated. Things move very fast, things change very fast. So, talk to people. It's very, very
hmm,
important to keep the communication alive and honest communication. If it is bad, say it is bad. If it is good, tell
hmm,
it is good. Pat on the back. If you are letting somebody go, tell people why you are letting somebody go. It doesn't always
hmm,
work well. If you are changing priorities, explain why you are changing priorities, because frustration is a big reason why people end up leaving startups. It's not the
hmm,
money, it's not that, it is just the frustration that I don't know what the hell is going on here. Sorry for that word. But I feel that ultimately, if you show it by example. You bring in your first hire who sees what's going on and how the company is evolving. They bring in two more people, they bring in four more people, and then, slowly you get to be, 700, 800, and 1,000 people organization. It takes effort, and it also is a it needs a lot of dedication, commitment, and you have to really work from the heart.
Yeah, of course, of course. I think, yeah, that's quite interesting. I never knew essentially because we all assume some let's say a big company like CrowdStrike joining, I mean, launching operations in the country, someone like an MD wouldn't have to do everything that you did, and it's very interesting that essentially you went through the grind that most of the startups go through, and then that's at least surprising for me to learn that you did it. So moving just a bit into actually let's say how building a product, right? So can you share some your thoughts on how should one go about building a cyber products, more importantly cyber product that not just serves Indian market but also for the world essentially, because what we've seen, we'll come to this discussion again, what we've seen is that people, our startups at least, have some challenge cracking international markets. So what should founder look out for when he or she is going about building their first product, so that it is not just capable enough to crack Indian market but also globally. Can you share some thoughts?
Sure. So, I've been meeting a lot of startup founders. I've met many before, and even now I continue to meet them. And one thing is common, the passion of what they are trying to do and their sense of ownership and the desire to build something great. So, that part is common, which is, I think, the most important factor that an entrepreneur really needs. But then there is a lot of steps between building an MVP, serving a few small customers, to really scaling it internationally, being able to crack a global and developed market, right? So for that, people need to have a global outlook. They need to have that exposure, and not everybody has that, right? You need to be there at the right conferences, go meet the people, see what is happening in the industry, understand what the customer challenge is in a large enterprise. Today, if you are serving an SMB customer in India, and a large enterprise customer in a developed country will have very different set of challenges, and your product may not be suitable there. So figuring that out, regulations are different in different countries. In Europe, you encounter GDPR. In India today, you encounter DPDP. So this, regulatory environment is another big factor. You need to know what other people are building, do a competitive analysis. Do you have a core IP? What are you innovating? What's your USP? What are you doing that is different? And can you position in front of a global customer, a global analyst, and who can really say, yeah, this is something you bring to the table, and that's the reason why you need to be in the leader quadrant, right? Look, the threat landscape, again, we have to look at the global threat landscape. The adversaries are evolving. AI is helping them to evolve and grow. And that is actually, this industry is so constantly moving forward quickly. If you have to keep tabs of it, because if you want to win the race, you have to be ahead of the adversary. So it is tough, it takes a lot of effort. And personally, I think people should initially start. I mean, there are two kinds of startups that are beginning in India, who have a very Indian context. They should probably take their own sweet time to, really grab the market here before they start thinking global. That's my personal opinion, because it also is a lot of cost to go into the US market.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, that's quite nice to know, right? Essentially, but we've briefly touched upon essentially finding your first hire, right, and building it from there, right? So I mean, in cybersecurity, finding I mean people is challenging, but also finding the right people is even more challenging. And add to that, essentially the funding that our startups typically get in India, it's very difficult to essentially find that right talent at the right position
Right.
and
Yeah.
everything, right? So Can you share some of your experience on what how should founders approach about hiring the first not firing but hiring the first foundational core engineering team and marketing team and sales team, and then taking it from there.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's a great question. I think you cannot do it alone. Startup is all about teamwork. The team has to be right to really make it successful. So I have personally adopted two, three ways of hiring, which I can actually talk about. One is I think go to the grassroots, go to the universities, hire straight from colleges, interns, take graduates who are really willing to who bring in that young blood, who are willing to put in a lot of effort and who bring in learnings and technologies that today we at this age we may not be it's difficult for us to keep up, but they can really keep up and they can be very agile, they can be very quick. So I think every organization, whether it's a startup or a large company, should do at least 15 to 20% of their hiring straight from colleges. That not only helps the overall market for the students to learn, that's one thing. A second thing, it helps to keep the cost down. But at the same time, you need leaders, right? You need a core
Yeah, of
team. You need
course.
an experienced core team to be who can drive these people, right? You can have workhorses, but you need the people who understand the technology, who can have the vision, who are looking forward, and who understand the customer requirement. So that's something where you have to hire laterally. But even in lately, I see sometimes the mistake that we make is we look for a very, very exact match. I need, just talking of development, I need to know the person has to know this language, the person has to know this database, person should have built this kind of product. When you try and look at a very precise match, you might get it. It is tough, but you might get it. But that doesn't mean the person is right for your company. What I have done always is find people who want to learn, who can adapt, who can learn, whose mission, whose thought process is similar to yours, who can work in the environment and the culture that you are trying to build, and most important, who are team players. So I always look for those people. So if you find somebody like that, even if he doesn't know, two of the five technologies you're looking for, it's fine. They'll learn, but they'll probably be better employees than somebody who is a perfect match. At the same time, another factor which is important is location. Where will you hire? Right?
Okay.
Different cities have different price points. I mean, I'm using the word price, but the salaries in Bangalore are different. Pune is different. You go to Ahmedabad or Nagpur, it's again a level different. And it depends on ultimately the cost that you can pay for people. I personally think that tier 2 cities are still very untapped. There is a lot of potential there. You can actually make a lot of good hires from tier 2. But the one thing that you really need to focus on when you are looking at tier 2 cities is two things. One is that they should be able to be effective remotely. Right, because you cannot have people all over the world. Then they have to work remote, and not everybody is as effective remote. And not everybody is going to pick up their base and come to Delhi or Bangalore. That's also not going to happen. So being able to work remotely is a thing you need to look for. And secondly, you need to look for people who are able to communicate their thoughts, ideas, inputs, who are not like just yes people, right? Just sitting down, okay, yes, I will do this. No, that's not the kind of people you look for in a startup. And just
Wow.
one more thing I want to stay here is that, and I think this is some topic which is very close to my heart is STEM education. I think overall, for the growth of India, for the growth of R&D, and more innovation to be done in the country, it's very important that we focus on STEM education. And founders, entrepreneurs are the people who can actually collectively push the academia and the people around you, right? The girls and boys in schools and colleges, help them understand the importance of STEM education and get into science and R&D, and we'll have many more people. And the cybersecurity skill gap that we see today, we can try towards filling that gap.
Wow. Okay, that's such a packed, I think, bunch of information for all of us, right? Essentially, you should have a core functional team. Don't look at 100% match. Essentially look at someone who's willing to learn, who's willing to experiment, who's articulative enough, and then form that a core team, and then from there go to the grassroots level, which are essentially not just IITs and NITs and triple ITs, but also from tier 2 colleges, and look at how employable a person is in terms of not just working from office but also remote, if they are working remotely, and then get them get them working, and then keep them engaged. I think that's the core message. um, and I hope essentially people could connect. I think because I don't want to say some things, but so if you hire from a specific group of colleges, I always get a feedback that people tend to leave after 1 or 2 years. But when you hire from a different set of let's say colleges from tier 2 tier 3 cities, the people tend to stay a bit longer. So that is one learning that people will have. And Jilmil, thank you for sharing that insight as well. So my next question is something that is quite relevant for a lot of NCOA startups, right? So, which is something around the GTM. What we've seen is that there are a lot of great founders who have great technology, fantastic technology, state of the art technology that could do so much than the competition, but they often have a lot of challenge hitting the market and getting the POs, right? So can you share some thoughts on how should one go about building an effective GTM strategy for their cyber products?
Yeah, sure. So, and that's a great question. And I think, like I said, I've been meeting so many startups, and
Hmm.
a lot of them I've seen are very strong technically. They know what they are building, they know their stack inside out. You talk to them about the platform or the product, and they talk with so much of enthusiasm and energy because they simply know it, right? At the same time, I find that the go to market is pretty weak in some of these companies. And I think that might have happened because it is a one person show, just to be very honest. It started by one person, one techie, somebody who, and plus, yes, they have a team, but they do not have a very solid person who can actually lead the go to market for them. So I would suggest the first thing for such startups to really go is find their go-to-market leader. It could be a co-founder, it could be a very senior person in the industry who they can either hire, bring on as advisor. But it is the one of the critical things because when you go in front of the investor, they are really looking for a very solid and scalable go-to-market strategy. And trust me, I know my startup failed because I did not have a great go-to-market strategy. I know I built a startup in 2015. I tried to work on it for about 5 years or so, and ultimately I put a stop to it because my go to market wasn't scaling, and every investor I met really told me that. So I learned my lesson, and I would want every entrepreneur to learn from that. So have the right co founders, know your market, right? Know your competition, engage with the customers, your partners, channels. Think about your pricing strategy, your positioning, and how you're going to be generating revenue. Today you are small, your revenue might be very small, but you should have that 3 year vision. How are you going to create different revenue channels, recurring revenue? How you're going to be doing that? How do you liaison with analysts and put your product on the global roadmap where you can be competing with the larger players in the industry as well? And plus, you have to be agile. It is not like you do it once you are done. No, the industry is changing so fast. If you keep devise a strategy and then you keep to it and don't change with the industry, you will be left behind. You have to constantly, again, innovation is not just in the product. The go to market also really needs a lot of innovation. Think about what's the difference you can make. Whether you're going for the government, you're going for the SMB sector, you're going for the enterprise sector. Have your target market, look at the problems, and make sure you work closely with the customers, your first few customers, to fine tune your product and have the right message that the customer is really willing to work with you going forward.
Okay, that's again such an insightful insight, rather into how should one go about doing the GTM, right? I mean, surprising that you also have a startup experience, and that is driving some of the stories as well. So in a nutshell, essentially find that very strong co-founder or someone on a leadership level who can augment your technical expertise with a strong GTM and think about recurring revenue and essentially take it from there, right? So on double clicking on one of the discussion points that we had, that is somehow that is in somewhat related to this discussion, is also going global. So we've talked about having that mindset to think globally, tracking everything that's happening globally, and then seeing how you fit in that puzzle. But what should what should one founder keep in mind as a think about cracking that first international deal, right? Essentially, let's say in a specific geography, take an example of let's say the North American market. You rightly said each market is very, very unique and different, but are there any common things that you've seen once you have to go global?
Right. So, I'll give you my insights, what I have seen in the industry. I am not an expert on go to market, I am more an engineering leader, but I've seen a few things and I'll tell you from my experience. Uh, Firstly, is I think uh, a startup needs the first few customers that they need are the friendly customers, right? Whether local or whether international, you need people who will be willing to work with you because your first product is not going to be right. You're going to be building and you're going to be trashing and you're going to be building and trashing till the time you really get it right. So it is important to have that first set of few friendly customers who you know or who your network knows, which come to you through your network, who are willing to try you out, give you real feedback so that you learn, you improve, and ultimately they become your first few customers. So that's the way really you enter the market. The other thing that I've seen working is really to work with channel partners and MSSPs, because if you want to set up a sales and marketing team in US and start selling your products there, it is pretty expensive, especially
Yeah.
for an Indian startup. Going through an MSSP, yes, they will take a percentage, but at the end of it, yeah, they know the market, they know how to sell. They have been selling, cybersecurity products all their life. For them, it is one more product, they will go and sell it. They don't own it, but they actually end up making a pretty good business, and a lot of large companies use their channel partners very, very effectively to scale up, right? But like I said before, uh, you need to be very, very put a lot of thought in determining what is a good time for you to enter into the global market. My personal, when I was again taking the example from my startup, my I also wanted to enter a global market. Everybody wants to become a big player in the industry, right? But at the same time, it is important to know what is the fund you have, what are your limitations, and first maybe let me create a strong base in India. Let me know that I can work with 50 customers here in India and solve their problems and build my brand. Once I have a brand and I have a reputation in the market, it's easier for me to go and talk to an analyst. See, the challenge also is the analysts are all North American, right? So you have to really work with them, and it is not easy to, one analyst going into one RSA costs you, thousands of dollars. It is not
Yeah.
easy for every startup to go out there, and if you are not there in the face, you can't make it work. So bid your time, look for the right time to really make a pitch and an entry in the global market. Till that time, strengthen your base in the country before you can, grow there.
Okay. So I would love to essentially ask you more questions, but we have two very important questions that from our audience that I wanted to touch with them, and then from there we'll go back to the questions because I feel these are important, and I don't think we have enough time. So. Vishwa is asking, essentially, he has a question on employee development in a startup environment. So, the startup that he works with is facing some challenges in upskilling the team. and they don't have a structured and learning development problems, certification reimbursements, and other benefits that MNCs typically offer. And this sort of sometimes affects the team's motivation. So, what strategies do you would you recommend for a startup with limited resources to still keep the team in high spirits and then get them learning all the time?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vishwa. Thank you for asking that. And it's one of my favorite topics to talk about as well. So I think motivation comes from several things. Ultimately, our objective is to have the team motivated, the employees motivated, so that they can work. They work with a lot of enthusiasm and give their 100%. There are primarily, in my mind, three factors that work towards it. One, of course, we all know is compensation, right? Compensation, people are looking for good compensation. We all, live in, a lot of us live in large cities, there's a cost of living and so on. And you are not able to compensate, at the level a large enterprise can. But what you really can do is, give them invested in the company, give them stocks, make them owners of the company so that the success of the company really becomes part of their charter as well. Number one. Number two is the environment you create, right? The environment is very, very important. I always talk about organization culture, the kind of culture you create. Yes, you do not have money for a L&D program and a constant upskilling. People want to do that. But what do you do to make sure there is retention of employees and there is long term stability? Again, what kind of environment are you creating? Open and honest communication. Make sure you reward people in different ways. Make sure you take people out for, lunches and outings. You do things that make the team a very, very close knit group. And
So,
I tell you one thing, at times when I was working in startups, I realized that when you sit down and solve problems together, nothing is as motivating as that. I've worked several nights in organizations with teams, 10 people, 20 people trying to solve a problem, getting the release out, which is the most critical, has to be done before 6 a.m. in the morning, India time. And, we've done that, and the entire team becomes so close knit, and those teams work together for years, right? So the environment is the second part of it. And the third part, of course, is the work that you are giving them. Everybody wants to do good work. You cannot say that I'll, give a better work in US and I'll not give good work here. If you are hiring, if you are a global team or you are an Indian team, if you are just hiring in India, if you are just are a global team, you need to have people at the same skill level do the same kind of work. Geography is really immaterial. And if you are able to do that, and if you are able to tell the employee, if you are able to do just one thing, tell the employee how important his role is and the impact he's making on the organization. And trust me, that one thing is enough to keep that employee motivated for the next few months. Yeah, you'll have to redo it again. So what I'm trying to say, uh, it is tough. There are going to be changing circumstances, but it's a constant work to work with people. And if you are invested in their people, they will know that you are there, you are invested in them, and they will be in turn invested in the company.
okay, that's nice. So, before we take a couple of more questions, but I will quickly come to one important question is specifically on the scaling up. So, what we've seen from our experiences, essentially scaling up from 10 to 100 to from there to 1,000 comes with a very unique problems that most of the time startup founders and startups are not prepared to deal with, right? So are there any common pitfalls that from your professional experience that you've seen that founders should be mindful of while they scale up from, let's say, 1 to let's say 10, 1 to 1,000 rather?
Yeah, absolutely. Company with 10 people is very different from
Yeah.
a company with 100 and a company with 1,000. And everything changes. The company is no longer the same. You know, the first thing that changes
Yeah.
is the discipline and processes, right? Your processes need to scale, your processes need to evolve. You can no longer, okay, just build and release. You need to be mindful that you have your product is out at 100 customers, and your quality processes really need to be right. If you have to
Yeah.
change anything in the system, yeah, it needs to be rightly reviewed and tested to
Yeah.
ensure that one line of change does not break anything else, that because you're not talking about one platform, 10 customers, you're
Yes.
talking about hundreds of customers, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that changes is the culture piece of it. The culture starts getting diluted, and it is very important to manage it because it's difficult, right? As it's like a family which is growing, growing, growing. How do you keep up with the ensure that you don't create a toxic environment? The people are happy. There is healthy competition. Everybody has the scope to grow, and all of that. It is tough, but that's something really to watch out for because if you see that dilution happening, people are going to be unhappy and you will not even know that people are being unhappy, right? And the third thing that changes is innovation, loses traction. So how to constantly innovate in this changing landscape? Because it becomes like the run of the mill thing. Okay, you need to do these five features, get the release out. These two features, get the release out. Where is innovation got lost in all of this? That's the most important factor, and all these things really need to be driven from the leadership down to every individual in the company. So you are constantly thinking about these things. And like I said before, innovation is not just an algorithm. It could be an innovation in the process. How to get a
Process. Yeah.
release out in 1 day instead of 7 days. It's a very big innovation. It saves time and money. So
Yeah.
these are few things which really impact get changed as the company scales up. So one needs to be mindful of them.
Okay. So I will go to one last question. This is more of a personal question, right? And we will take if we are already a bit running behind the schedule, but I think we can have a couple of more minutes. But Jilmil, essentially, knowing everything that you do now, and then if you have to start a new venture as of today, right? What would you do differently, and what things would remain same, and what would you do differently, and that will be applicable for most of the startups that are building in cyber products.
All right. So firstly, I am not going to start a startup. That is, I'm very clear on that. At that time, I think my motto at this point in time is to help people who are actually doing their own startup. At the
Yeah.
same time, hypothetically speaking, if I were, building my startup, what would I do? What would I do same and what would I do differently? I think some of the things that I would do same is, have the right co-founders, have the right team, the core team that I can trust. So build a very solid core team, with whom I can bet on them with my life. So that kind of a team is something that I would look for. And that's something I've always done in my own startups as well as in the companies I've worked for. One thing that I would do differently is to build a better business model than I have done in the past because I think that was my weakness. And I realize how critically important it is for any startup to be successful because every investor really looks for that. One another thing I will do differently is I will not hesitate to ask for help. I think sometimes we have it in our mind if we go and talk to too many people, if we ask for help, people may think we don't know what we are doing or my idea is going to become common, people are going to it's going to be duplicated, somebody else will build it. No, people want to help you. People are not out here to really steal your ideas. Plus, remember, innovation is not proprietary to you. There are 20 people who are trying to do the same thing.
Same thing.
Execution is the key. The person who
Yes.
does execute more efficiently and effectively really wins the race. That's how it is. So talk to people, get as much learning as you can from people who have been there, done it, people from the industry, your mentors, advisors, your customers, and then build on top of it. Listen as much as you can. I think these are probably, and I think one last point here, if you have the time, uh, do I would never bring a big product, in a short time. I will try to bring a small MVP, minimum viable product that I can sell. Sometimes we make the mistake, we try to club it with too many things, too many features, because those features have a feel good, it excites us. But no, you can't do everything together. Build a small thing which will sell, and then you can have phase one, phase two, phase 10, and can continue building on top of it. So don't try to do everything all at once. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Okay. It's such an insightful insights anyway, all the time, Jhilmil. And I'll take one last question and then we'll have to conclude. Essentially, Neeraj is asking, essentially, build and rebuilding things take time. And what are the strategy on integrating with existing products, cyber products, I hope? Should they build everything from scratch, or should they integrate with whatever is existing there? And what do you recommend?
Yeah, great question, Neeraj. Though the response would probably be more contextual, but I would say, uh, do not. If somebody has built it, there are two things. One is that you have your own core innovative IP built product that you are building. At the same time, cybersecurity as an industry works on. There are hundreds of things that the industry needs.
Yeah,
You can't build everything. You are
correct.
going to be part of a large ecosystem. And if you don't integrate well with some of the other players in the market, a SOAR player or a SEAM player or other products in the market, you are going to be left out because you are going to be standalone. If you want to scale, a large enterprise has 50 to 60 products. You have to be able to work with each one of them, and every customer will have a different product. If you're not have a integration strategy or the right way where you have your exposed APIs, you can take in data, work on them, throw out information. If you're not able to do that, you will be isolated and it will be very difficult to play as a key player in the ecosystem.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, with that, I think we'll have to. We are almost 6 minutes late, so we'll have to conclude here, Jilmin. So, I hope people who joined us have learned quite a bit. I certainly have learned quite a bit, especially from how should one go about not just building a business, but also having a great GTM and taking it global, building a right, making your team part of your company, and then getting them invested in your company, and then getting themselves invested with you, and then you investing with them. And also, we have also discussed about what you should be thinking about when you have to scale, from what are some of the common pitfalls that you probably will encounter, and then how should you plan to mitigate them. So Jilmil is also lucky for us. Jilmil is also one of the mentors at the NCYE platform. So in case if you want to talk to her on a one-to-one basis, you can send in a request, and then we'll be happy to forward that request to Jilmil. And then depending upon her availability and how, if she can help you out, then she will be able to help you out. We'll be happy to connect you with her and you, and then we'll take it from there. So with that, thanks all of you for joining us today, and then certainly thanks Jilmil for your insight. Such an interesting discussion for me and for the people, and such an engaging audience as well. So I look forward to seeing you again very soon, and then if there's any interest from the startups, I'd be happy to connect you with them, and then we can take it from there. So thank you.
Thank you, Teja. Thank you, DSA, and thank you, people.
Of course, thanks.